أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، بارئ الخلائق أجمعين، باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على خير خلقه العبد المؤيد والرسول المسدد، حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين وصحابته المنتجبين. قال الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم: وما أرسلنا من قبلك إلا رجالا نوحي إليهم فاسألوا أهل الذكر إن كنتم لا تعلمون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. Does Islam encourage asking questions, or does it forbid asking questions? Are we encouraged to ask, or are we invited to accept everything blindly without asking? Here, there's two views, 2 points of views. One point of view says that you're not allowed to ask. What you are given, you should take for face value. Don't ask, why is this haram? Why is that forbidden? Why is this wajib? You have no right to ask. Take what you're given for face value. That is iman, that is faith. Faith is in accepting everything that you're told without asking questions and posing questions. This is one view. This is one point of view that some scholars hold. I remember I was once scolded by a colleague that, why do you try to explain to your listeners why is music haram? Why is usury haram? Why is fasting wajib? Why do you try to explain why? They don't need to know why. They have to follow. That is iman, that is faith. Faith is accepting what you're told without asking questions. Tell them that music is haram and that's it. If they want to accept, they accept. If they don't want to accept, that's their problem. It's not your job to try to explain anything to anyone. If they want to accept it, take it or leave it, basically. This is one point of view. Another point of view says that you're allowed to ask questions. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us inquisitive minds for a reason, so that we may ask, we may ponder, we may think. I can ask regarding my faith, regarding tenets and principles of my faith. I can ask about the rituals of my religion, regarding fasting, regarding salah, regarding hajj. I may ask. And by asking, it doesn't mean that I'm objecting. There's a difference between rejecting and objecting and rejecting, and by asking. When I ask, why is it that we have to fast for 30 days out of the year? It doesn't mean that I reject fasting or that I'm objecting to it. For some people, questioning or asking a question is equivalent to objecting and to rejecting. Well, this is not the case. You can ask a question, but it doesn't mean that you're rejecting or that you're objecting to that principle. If you ask, for example, about khums, why do we have to pay khums? Doesn't mean that you object. Doesn't mean that you reject khums, but you sincerely want to know why we have to pay khums, for example. Or why do we have to fast? Or why is music haram? You sincerely want to know why. Not that you're objecting. In fact, we are encouraged to ask questions. We are encouraged to understand. Faith that is based on understanding, by asking questions, the important questions, and having those questions answered for you, basing your faith upon something that you understand, that faith will last. As opposed to a faith that you're told not to ask questions. Follow blindly. Take it for face value. This person maybe might become religious for a while, but at some point they will face a crisis, a problem, an issue in their life. Well, they'll switch. They will switch. Why? Because their faith was not based on understanding. It was based under dogma. It was dogmatic. Just like the way the church used to preach 2 centuries ago. You take it or you leave it. You either take what we're telling you or you're excommunicated from the church. You're not a good Christian. There are some people, they believe Islam should be the same way. That you have no right to object or ask questions. You have no right to ask, why do we do this? Why do we abstain from a certain behavior or a certain act? You have no right to ask. And if you ask, you're excommunicated. You're labeled as a deviant. While this is not the case, my dear friends. When we understand the spirit of the Quran, we come to know that we are encouraged to ask questions. We are encouraged to think and to ponder, to think over our faith and religion. Why do we accept the things that we do? Why do we do the things that we do? We have to understand them, not take them for face value. Allah Azza wa Jal doesn't want worship of slaves. Imam Ali alayhi salam, he says, Ilahi, ma abadtuka hina abadtuk khawfan min narik. My Lord, when I worshipped you, I didn't worship you out of fear of your hellfire. There are some people when they fast because they don't want to go to hellfire. But that was not how Amir al-Mu'mineen fasted. لم أعبدك حين عبدتك خوفا من نارك ولا طمعا في جنتك. And not because I have, interest in heaven because I would like to go to heaven. No, Amir al-Mu'mineen, when he worshipped, it wasn't out of fear of hellfire, nor was it out of interest or love of heaven. Then what was it, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen? He says, وَلَكِنْ وَجَدْتُكَ أَهْلًا لِلْعِبَادَةِ فَعَبَدْتُكَ. I found you worthy of being worshipped, so I worshipped you. Amir al-Mu'mineen tells Allah, I found you worthy. This is a worship based on understanding, based on knowing who Allah is. Because Allah is the creator, and I am the created. I am the creation. Because He's the king, and I'm His subject. Naturally, this sort of relationship requires the subject to worship the king. It requires the created to worship the creator. Naturally. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam also says, إِنَّ قَوْمًا عَبَدُوا اللَّهَ خَوْفًا مِنْ نَارَهُ وَتِلْكَ عِبَادَةُ الْعَبِيدِ. There are some that worship Allah because they're afraid of hellfire. That's the only cause. That's the only motive behind their worship. Because they're afraid of hellfire. Because ever since they were children, they were taught, if you don't pray, you go to hell. If you don't fast, you go to hell. If you lie, you go to hell. All they know about Allah is that He puts people into hell. This sort of worship trains us to be slaves. This is the worship of a slave. This is not the type of worship that Allah wants. وَأَنَّ قَوْمًا عَبِدُوا اللَّهَ طَمَعًا فِي جَنَّتِهِ وَتِلْكَ عِبَادَةُ التُّجَّارِ. And there are some that worship Allah because they want to go to heaven. So for them it's a business transaction. These people are businessmen. They do something, but in return, they want heaven. This is the worship of businessmen. It's a trade. They're merchants. وَإِنَّ قَوْمًا عَبَدُوا اللَّهَ شُكْرًا وَتِلْكَ عِبَادَةُ الْأَحْرَارِ. And there are some that don't worship Allah because they are afraid of His hell or because they have interest in His heaven, but because of gratitude. They have gratitude for Him. They're ungrateful to Him, so they worship Him. وَتِلْكَ عِبَادَةُ الْأَحْرَارِ. This is the worship of free men. The worship of free men. That is why we read in some hadith that to think and to ponder for 1 hour is better than spending the entire night in worship, but out of ignorance, of not knowing who Allah is, not knowing anything about Islam. You spend the entire night reciting Quran, you recite dua, and you pray Salat al-Layl. But instead, if you had spent 1 hour to think and to ponder over your faith and religion, that hour is more valuable the entire night of worship. This means that Islam emphasizes on understanding and comprehending. Islam doesn't just want the worship of slaves, worship that is based on ignorance. We pray because we have to pray, not because we understand why, because we need to. Or why do we fast? Because we need to. No. Because if I don't fast, there's hellfire for me. Allah doesn't want this sort of worship. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم تفكر ساعة خير من قيام ليلة. Just to think for 1 hour is more valuable than worshiping for an entire night. Thus, we are encouraged to ask questions. To go back to my initial question that I asked in the beginning of the lecture. Does Islam encourage us to ask questions? Absolutely. How many times does the Quran say, أَفَلَا يَعْقِلُونَ أَفَلَا يَتَفَكَّرُونَ أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ? Do they not think? Do they not comprehend? Do they not reason? Islam invites us to think and to critically analyze what we're given. To think and to ponder and to ask questions, raise questions, to critically think and analyze. This is permissible. Don't allow anyone to tell you that in Islam you're not allowed to ask questions. Don't ask such a question. No, there's not a single question in Islam that you cannot ask. And don't let anyone tell you that to ask is to object. No. When you ask, it doesn't mean that you're objecting. If you ask, why in Islam do we pay khums? It doesn't mean that you reject khums or you object to this legislation. You sincerely want to know why. And when you know why, you will give khums without being reminded. When you truly understand the tenets of your faith, you will become appreciative of it. You'll appreciate it. You won't have anyone, you don't need anyone to remind you of paying khums, or to fast, or to pray, or to do whatever, because you understand it. You will appreciate it. We read in the Quran that prophets would ask questions. If asking a question was forbidden in Islam, why did prophets ask? We see the Ibrahim alayhi salam. He would ask, قال ربي أرني كيف تحيي الموتى قال أولم تؤمن. Ibrahim asked Allah to show him how he will resurrect the dead, how he resurrects the dead. Allah told him, Ya Ibrahim, you don't accept? You don't believe? قال بلى ولكن ليطمئن قلبي. I do, but I want to be rest assured. Allah told him, take 4 birds, cut them into pieces, mix them together, put them on 10 different mountains and hills, and then call them, they will each come to you. Thus, even prophets would ask questions. Angels would ask questions. Is there a creation more obedient than angels? Even angels asked questions. وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. Allah told the angels, I will put a representative on earth. قالوا أتجعل فيها من يفسد فيها ويسفك الدماء ونحن نقدس بحمدك ونحن نسبح لك ونقدس بحمدك. Do you want to put someone on earth who will spoil and corrupt the earth? They were asking. Allah didn't scold them. Allah didn't tell them that what you're asking is kufr, it's blasphemy, it's heresy. No. قال إني أعلم ما لا تعلمون. I know something that you don't. Very simple answer. Allah didn't scold them. Allah didn't tell them that because you're asking me, you're disobedient angels. No. He simply told them, I know that which you do not know. Thus, we have to ask, my dear friends, this is your faith. This is your religion. It's what will take you either to heaven or to hell. You have to ask questions. Ask about your faith. Ask about your iman. Ask about your fiqh. Ask about your laws. You're invited to ask questions. You're invited to know about your faith and about the Islamic legal system. You're encouraged to ask. One year, we were in Hajj. And one of the years we were in Hajj. People in Hajj usually, they ask a lot of questions. They want to know if their tawaf was correct, if their sa'i was correct. When they stoned the shaitan, did they do it correctly? People tend to ask a lot of questions. And, not only do they ask a lot of questions, if they have, for example, 3 scholars in their group, they'll go and ask each scholar the same exact question. They go around asking. So people have a tendency in Hajj to ask. One year when we were in Hajj, there was a gentleman with us. He didn't ask a single question. So I was wondering, has he been to Hajj before? I asked him. He said, no, this is my first Hajj. SubhanAllah. You don't have any questions? No. We went to Umrah. He didn't ask a single question. It's as if he knew everything. And then we went to Hajj. We went to Arafah, Muzdalifah, Mina, and all the rituals. This gentleman didn't ask a single question. Although it was his first Hajj. And the details, the rituals of a Hajj are so detailed. Even if you've been to Hajj many times, you still ask questions. Until the last day, when the trip was coming to an end, it was the final day of our trip. He said, Sayyid, I have a question. I said, Alhamdulillah, finally. He has a question. He said, Sayyid, how much weight are we allowed to put in our bags? I told him, it depends. Who do you follow? Do you do taqleed of whom? Because it depends on your taqleed. Some say it's 20 kilograms, others say it's 25 kilograms. He wasn't sure if I was joking or being serious. That's silly. You go to Hajj, ask about the a'mal of your Hajj. When you're fasting, ask about the rituals of fasting, of salah. This is your faith. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. There's a hadith that says, ثلاثة يشكون إلى الله يوم القيامة. 3 will complain to Allah on the Day of Judgment. Whom? Al-Quran al-Mahjur. The Quran that has been put aside, like most of our copies at my house and at your house. The Quran that has been sitting on that shelf for an entire year and that's collected dust and no one has read in it. It will complain on the Day of Judgment. وَالْمَسْجِدُ الْمَهْجُورِ. And a mosque that has been abandoned. You see a mosque, it's very beautiful from outside, but from inside, it's empty. There's nothing. No one goes. It's an empty mosque. That mosque will complain on the Day of Judgment. And 3, وَعَالِمٌ ضَاعَ بَيْنَ جُهَالٍ. A scholar that lives amongst people, but no one took advantage of him. No one asked him questions. No one benefited from his knowledge. The scholar studied for several years. He did his research, he wrote books, and so on and so forth, but no one benefits from his knowledge. This person on the Day of Judgment will complain to Allah Azza wa Jal that I lived amongst the people, but no one made use of my presence. No one asked me questions. No one made use of my knowledge. This person will complain on the Day of Judgment. We're encouraged. If you see a scholar that has studied, that has worked hard on himself or herself, ask them questions. زَاحِمُ الْعُلَمَاءَ بِرُكَبِكُمْ. The hadith says, annoy scholars. Annoy them. Go to them. Ask them questions. Whatever's on your mind. Benefit from a scholar's presence. How many scholars do we have across this nation in the West, but people don't benefit from them? They don't make use of them. When do they realize that they have a great gift in their community? When that scholar goes away, or that scholar dies, and then people realize what a true gem he was in the community, and they didn't take advantage of him. Or when he moves to another country, or another city, or another state. We have to take advantage of a scholar. Ask them quality questions. There was a alim in the city of Najaf, Ayatollah Sayyid al-Shahrudi. He passed away over 30, 40 years ago. Sayyid al-Shahrudi, in one of the summers, when you're in Najaf and it gets very hot in the summer, where do you go? You go to your next door country. You go to Iran. You go to Mashhad for ziyarah. So he came to Iran and he's passing by in the cities on his way to Mashhad. He stopped in a local village to pray Salatul Dhuhr and Asr. He went to a mosque. He went inside a masjid to pray Salatul Dhuhr and Asr. As he was sitting on his prayer mat, one of the gentlemen in the mosque came and asked him a question. The Sayyid answered him, and then he prayed. It was time to pray. And then he got in his car and he left. Several villages later, the Sayyid said, wait, stop. We have to go back. Where? He said, go back to the village. Why? He said, I just realized that I gave him a wrong answer. You want us to go back? He said, yes, go back. I have to correct my answer. So they went back. Imagine 30 years ago, there's no email, there's no Twitter. How do you expect to find that individual who was at the mosque 4 hours ago, 5 hours ago, 6 hours ago? So they looked all over the city. It's a small village until finally they found that gentleman. They called him. The Sayyid said, come here. What was your question? He asked. He gave him an answer, another answer. He told him, the first answer that I gave you was wrong. I made a mistake. This is the right answer. He said, Sayyid, didn't you travel? He said, yes. He said, you came all the way to correct your answer? He said, yes. He said, Sayyid, I'm very sorry, but I saw you sitting in the masjid before salah time. I saw you were bored. So I said, let me entertain the Sayyid with a question. I didn't think this is going to happen. See, this is a mistake. You have a scholar, ask him a quality question, not because you want time to pass by or because you have extra time. You say, let me ask the Sayyid or the Sheikh a question. Ask serious questions that benefit you, that increase your faith, that increase your iman. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Questions are of two types, my dear brothers and sisters. Questions are of two types. سؤال استفهامي وسؤال تعنتي. سؤال استفهامي is a inquisitive question. When you genuinely want to understand, when you genuinely want to learn, you come and ask a Sayyid, a alim, a mujtahid, because you genuinely want to learn your faith. There's another type of question called su'alun ta'annuti, when you don't want to learn. You want to cause fitna. You want to test the other side. You come and ask the Sayyid, Sayyid, what is your opinion of so-and-so scholar or so-and-so speaker? What is your opinion of so-and-so who said, whatever on YouTube or in his lecture? This is not a question where that person wants to learn. This is a question where a person wants to cause fitna. They ask you not to learn, but to cause fitna. Sayyid, what is your opinion on Walayat al-Faqih? Or what is your opinion on tatbir? Do you really care about my opinion? Or do you want to test me? Do you want to cause fitna? You want to go around and you say that? For example, I asked the Sayyid and the Sayyid condemned such a behavior. Or the Sayyid promoted such a behavior. There are some people like this. When they have a resident alim or a visiting alim, instead of asking questions that really benefit them, inquisitive questions because they're curious, they ask questions to test or to cause trouble or to cause fitna or, to cause a scene for that person. This is a mistake. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, إِذَا سَأَلْتَ فَاسْأَلْ مُتَفَقِّهًا تَفَقُّهًا وَلَا تَسْأَلْ تَعَنُّتًا. When you ask a question, ask to really learn, not to cause a problem or to cause a fitna. When you know the answer, but you just want to see what the other side has to say, to cause fitna in the community. We have plenty of fitnas, my dear friends. We don't need any more. Every community you go, you see that there's some sort of problem. Why do we add salt to injury? Why do we want to increase the fitna in the community? This is something we have to pay attention to. Also, you know how they say there's no such thing as stupid questions? There's plenty of stupid questions. Believe me, ask me. There's plenty of stupid questions. If you want to ask, and there's a scholar, or you have the opportunity to ask a good question. Something that benefits you, benefits the community, increases your ma'rifah, increases your knowledge, makes you closer to Allah Azza wa Jal. Not a question that doesn't benefit you whatsoever. I remember this Muharram. After one of my lectures, one of the gentlemen came and asked me, Sayyid, there's a question that I really want to ask you about, and I've always been thinking about. What do jinn eat? I told him, I'm sorry, I've never been invited by a jinn to a restaurant for me to tell you what they order. I don't know. And let's say they prefer hamburgers or pizza. What's it to you? What is it going to do for you? Are you going to become closer to Allah Azza wa Jal? Is it going to increase your knowledge to know what jinn eat or what they don't eat, if they eat? I remember a couple of years back in Karbala, we were at the haram of Imam Hossein. Also, a gentleman came to ask one of my brothers. He told him, Sayyid, you know when Prophet Musa alayhi salam, he was in Midian, when he escaped from the Pharaoh, he escaped Egypt and he went to Midian, and there he raised cattle, he had sheep for 10 years, and then he came back to Egypt, and in the middle of the desert, he saw a fire, a burning tree, and he heard Allah speaking to him, so he went to the tree. He said, yeah, what's the question? What did he do with his sheep? Where did he leave his sheep? For God's sake, Allah is speaking to Musa and you're worried about his sheep? Where he kept his sheep? This is a sort of question that doesn't increase your faith, nor does it make you closer to Allah Azza wa Jal, nor does it increase your knowledge. So there are stupid questions. When we ask, we should ask questions that benefit us, benefit the community, benefits our children. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam says, Husnul su'al nusful ilm. See? Husnul su'al. To choose your questions wisely. Know which question to ask, that is half of knowledge. Asking the right question to the right person, that is half of knowledge. That shows your level of intellectuality. That shows what an intellectual you are, of knowing what to ask. Husnul su'al nusful ilm. Also, my dear friends, asking is good, knowing about your faith is good, but it is also important to know when to stop. Not every good question is a good question. There are some questions that are unnecessary. Unnecessary. Let me give you an example. In every community, there's one individual that goes and asks about Oreo cookies, or about Pepsi, is Pepsi haram or halal? Or Oreo cookies halal or haram? They go and they want to dig deep. They make phone calls. They send emails to try to discover if this product, of this candy, of this cookie is halal or haram. First of all, who made you the halal police? This is one. Two, who told you have to ask? Yes, when it comes to meat, we have to make sure that it is halal. The meat that we eat, lamb, beef, chicken, fish, that has to be halal. We have to ask. But other than meat, you don't have to ask. كل شيء لك حلال. Everything for you is halal. You don't have to ask about M&Ms or cookies or Pepsi or Sprite. Are these things halal or haram, or do they contain a product that is haram? Who told you have to ask? Some people think that they're being extra religious. No, who told you you're being extra religious? Islam tells you to take it easy sometimes. And no, these people, it's not enough to make it haram for themselves, but they have to announce to the entire community, don't eat this product anymore. Who told you? They have to go around making announcements and making things more haram for people. Who's told you that this is haram? Who told you that you have to ask? See, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, ذَرُونِي مَا تَرَكْتُكُمْ فَإِنَّمَا هَلَكَ مَنْ كَانَ قَبْلَكُمْ بِكَثْرَةِ سُؤَالِهِمْ وَاخْتِلَافِهِمْ عَلَى أَنْبِيَائِهِمْ. Rasulullah says that take from me what I give you. More than that, you don't have to come and ask. It's like the people of Musa. When Allah told them, slaughter a sheep, what did they do? They told him, إِنَّ الْبَقَرَ تَشَابَهَ عَلَيْنَا إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُكُمْ أَن تَذْبَحُوا بَقَرَةً. Allah told Bani Israel, slaughter a cow. That's it. Allah didn't say which type of cow, which color, which size. Slaughter any cow. But they had to dig deep. Tell us which color is it. Tell us which size is it. Tell us. And the more they dug deep, the deeper they dug, the harder Allah made it upon themselves. The harder Allah made it upon them. Go easy and Allah will make it easy upon you. Rasulullah says, إِنَّهُمْ أُمِرُوا بِأَدْنَى بَقَرَةٍ لَكِنَّهُمْ لَمَّا شَدَّدُوا عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ شَدَّدَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِمْ. Allah told them to slaughter any cow. But when they made it harder upon themselves, Allah made it harder upon them as well. So there are some questions that are deemed unnecessary. Be careful when you ask. طيب. Also, if you were asked a question and you don't know, there is no shame in saying, I don't know. There are some people, they think that if they're asked a question, they have to answer. Whether they know the answer or they don't know the answer, they have to put an answer. Because if they don't know, it's embarrassing. How can I say that I don't know? While Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, or Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, he says, لا يستحي العالم إذا سئل عما لا يعلم أن يقول لا أعلم. A scholar should never be ashamed if he is asked something that he doesn't know, say, I don't know. There's no shame in that. If you're a scholar, if you're a teacher, if you're a doctor, don't give a wrongful answer. All the shame in giving a wrongful answer, but there's no shame in saying, La a'lam, I don't know. There's no shame in that. One scholar was asked a question, he said, I don't know. He was asked another question, he said, I don't know. He was asked a third question, he said, I don't know. So the person told him, what type of scholar are you? I asked you 3 questions and you said, I don't know. He said, 3? Ask me 1,000 questions and I'll tell you I don't know. Just because I'm a scholar doesn't mean that I'm a ma'soom, I know everything. So there's no shame in saying, I don't know when you don't know the answer. طيب. We read in history about Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam. One of the famous quotes that Amir al-Mu'mineen was known to have said is, Saluni qabla an tafqiduni. Ask me before you lose me. Take advantage of me. He would say, إِنَّهَا هُنَا لَعِلْمًا جَمَّا لَوْ أَصَبْتُ لَهُ حَمَلًا. Here, and he would point to his chest, I carry a lot of knowledge. But where are those who can carry my knowledge? Where are those who I can pass on my knowledge to them? سلوني قبل أن تفقدوني. Ask me before you lose me. سلوني عن طرق السماء فإني والله أعلم بها من طرق الأرض. Ask me about the highways and the paths and the roads of the sky. I am more knowledgeable of them than the paths and the roads of the earth. No other Sahaba ever said this. Not Abu Bakr, not Umar, not Uthman, not Muawiyah. None of them. Even Ibn Abbas was known for his knowledge, or Ibn Mas'ud, those who were known for their knowledge. None of them said this. Bring me a quote, bring me a source that one of the Sahaba, other than Amir al-Mu'mineen, said, Saluni qabla an tafquduni. Ask me. This is a challenge. When Amir al-Mu'mineen says, ask me, does he have the answer or he doesn't have the answer? Of course he has the answer. He has the answer. If there was no other proof for the rightful khilafah of Imam Ali other than this, if there was no Ghadir Khum, if there was no other hadith, so many hadith that attest to the virtue of Imam Ali, if we put all of them aside and we only have this, Saluni qabla an tafquduni, ask me before you lose me, it is sufficient to say that Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib was the rightful Khalifa. It doesn't take rocket science, it doesn't take a genius to figure it out. One of the Sahaba who says, ask me before you lose me. And no one else would dare say this. Isn't this enough proof that he should be the Khalifa and no one else? That's besides the fact that the Khulafa would come and ask Amir al-Mu'mineen. Umar ibn al-Khattab asked Amir al-Mu'mineen over 90 times to solve cases for him. And in each time he would say, Lawla Aliyun lahalaka Umar. If it wasn't for Ali, Umar would have perished. طيب. As I conclude, my dear friends, this was all an introduction, inshallah. This was an introduction to a series that will come in the next 2 weeks, where I will be at your service, inshallah. There's a theme in the Quran. There are several verses in the Quran that begin with, يَسْأَلُونَك. They ask you, Ya Rasulullah. They ask you. They ask you about the crescents. They ask you about alcohol, wine, and gambling. They ask you about the sacred months. They ask you, they ask you, they ask you. And in every case, قُل, tell them. Rasulullah answers. Rasulullah didn't ignore any of the questions that came to him. Every question that he was asked, يَسْأَلُونَك, Allah tells him, قُل, tell them, and he answers. Sometimes with very logical answers, very reasonable answers. These questions that Rasulullah received, some of them pertain to history, some of them pertain to Islamic law, some of them pertain to theology, a variety of these questions. Inshallah, in the next 2 weeks, we will examine these verses that are known as the verses of يسألونك أو ويسألونك inshallah. نسألك اللهم وندعوك باسمك العلي الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم يا الله. اللهم لا تدع لنا ذنبا إلا غفرته ولا هما إلا فرجته ولا عيبا إلا سترته ولا خوفا إلا آمنته ولا رزقا إلا بسطته ولا شملا إلا جمعته ولا مرضا إلا شفيته ولا غائبا إلا حفظته وأدنيته ولا حاجة من حوائج الدنيا والآخرة لك فيها رضا ولنا فيها صلاح إلا قضيتها ويسرتها يا أرحم الراحمين. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين.